They called her Wolf Girl, and they didn't mean it kindly. Sarah had grown up with the whispers, following her like shadows. Strange child. Unnatural. Something wrong with her. She'd learned to keep her head down, to make herself small, to pretend she didn't notice the way the other servants crossed themselves when she walked past. It had started when she was 5 years old, the first time a wolf had wandered onto the castle grounds and, instead of running like any sensible child would, Sarah had walked right up to it. The beast had been massive, silver-furred and yellow-eyed, with teeth that could tear a man apart. The guards had shouted warnings, had scrambled for weapons, certain they were about to watch a child be devoured. But the wolf had simply lowered its great head and let Sarah scratch behind its ears. That had been 18 years ago. In the time since, wolves had continued to find her. They appeared at the edge of the forest when she gathered herbs, padded alongside her when she walked to the village, curled up outside whatever window she slept beneath. Wild wolves. Wolves that should have fled from humans or attacked them. Wolves that instead pressed their muzzles into her palms and looked at her with eyes that seemed almost human. No one understood it. Most people feared it. Devil's mark, the cook muttered whenever Sarah entered the kitchen. Beast blood in her veins. Should have drowned her as a babe, agreed the head housekeeper, before whatever's wrong with her could spread. Sarah had learned long ago not to cry at their words. Tears only made them crueler. She was 23 now, a scullery maid in the castle of Lord Ashworth, and she had accepted that this was her life, scrubbing pots, hauling water, enduring the mockery and the fear. The wolves were her only friends, the only creatures in the world who seemed to want her company, and even that was something she had to hide. If Lord Ashworth ever found out how many wolves gathered in the forest behind the castle, drawn by her presence, he would surely have her killed. So she kept her secret as best she could. She only visited the wolves at night, when everyone else was asleep. She never spoke of the dreams she had. Strange dreams of running through moonlit forests on 4 legs, of howling at the sky, of being part of something vast and ancient and wild. She was careful. She was quiet. She was invisible. And then the Lycan king came. The castle had been in an uproar for days preparing for his visit. The Lycan king, ruler of the northern territories, a creature of legend and nightmare. They said he was 300 years old. They said he could shift into a wolf the size of a horse. They said he'd killed 100 men with his bare hands and felt nothing. Sarah didn't know what to believe. She only knew that she'd been assigned to serve at the welcome feast, which meant carrying heavy platters and keeping her eyes on the floor and praying no one noticed her. The great hall was packed with nobles when she entered, balancing a tray of roasted pheasant. She kept to the edges of the room, moving between tables, refilling goblets and clearing plates. The Lycan king sat at the head table beside Lord Ashworth, and Sarah was careful not to look at him, careful not to draw attention. But she could feel something, a pull, like a hook behind her ribs, tugging her toward the high table. A strange warmth spreading through her chest. She ignored it, focused on her work, told herself it was nothing. Then one of the other servants, a girl named Martha who had always hated Sarah, stuck out her foot as Sarah passed. Sarah went down hard. The tray flew from her hands, pheasant and gravy splattering across the stone floor. Laughter erupted from nearby tables as she scrambled to her knees, face burning with humiliation, desperately trying to gather the ruined food. "Clumsy wolf girl," Martha sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe you should eat that off the floor. That's how your beast friends do it, isn't it?" More laughter. Sarah's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "What did you call her?" The voice cut through the laughter like a blade through silk. Deep, commanding, and edged with something dangerous. Sarah looked up. The Lycan king had risen from his seat. He was enormous, taller than any man she'd ever seen, broad-shouldered and powerful, with dark hair that fell past his jaw and eyes the colour of molten gold. Those eyes were fixed on Martha, and the serving girl had gone pale as milk. I called her Wolf Girl, Your Majesty," Martha stammered. It's just what we call her, because she's strange. The wolves follow her around, and it's unnatural, and the wolves follow her." The king's voice was soft now, almost contemplative. His golden gaze shifted from Martha to Sarah, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Show me." Sarah's heart stopped. "Your Majesty?" "Show me," he repeated. "Call them. I can't just—" She was trembling. This was her secret, the thing she'd hidden for 18 years, and he was asking her to reveal it in front of everyone. "Please, I don't know what she's talking about. I'm just a servant. I'm nobody." The king moved. One moment he was at the high table, and the next he was standing before her, close enough that she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. He was so tall, so impossibly, overwhelmingly present. "You're lying," he said quietly. "I can hear your heartbeat. I can smell the forest on your skin." He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her want to run and stay in equal measure. "You smell like pack." She didn't understand. She didn't understand any of this. "Please," she whispered. "I'll be punished. If they know—" "No one will punish you." His voice was a low growl, a promise and a threat wrapped together. "Call them." She didn't know what made her obey. Fear, perhaps. Or something deeper. That strange pull in her chest that had been tugging at her since he'd entered the room. She closed her eyes and reached out with that part of herself she'd always kept hidden. The part that dreamed of moonlight and howling. The part that had never felt human. "Come," she thought. "Come to me." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from outside the great hall, she heard it. The sound of wolves howling. One voice at first, then two, then a dozen, rising in a chorus that made the nobles gasp and scramble back from the windows. The doors to the great hall burst open. Wolves poured through, not one or two, but an entire pack, silver and grey and black, their eyes gleaming in the torchlight. The nobles screamed, climbing onto tables, drawing swords. But the wolves ignored them. They flowed around the panicked humans like water around stones, heading straight for Sarah. The great silver wolf, who had found her when she was 5, reached her first. He pressed his massive head against her hip, and she dropped her hand to his fur without thinking. The rest of the pack surrounded her, circling, some sitting, some lying down, all of them watching her with those strange, too intelligent eyes. In the chaos, a single voice rang out, Lord Ashworth, red-faced with fury. "You see? You see what she is? She's a witch, a beast-caller. She's been hiding this abomination, under my roof for years. I want her executed. I want—" "Enough." The Lycan king's voice silenced the hall. He was looking at Sarah and her wolves, and the expression on his face was nothing she could have predicted. Not fear, not disgust, not anger. Wonder. He was looking at her with wonder. "Do you know why the wolves follow you?" he asked softly. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because you're one of us. He stepped closer, and the wolves parted to let him through, acknowledging him as one of their own. You have the soul of a wolf, Sarah. You always have. That's why they come to you. That's why they love you. He reached out and touched her cheek, his fingers impossibly gentle. And that's why I've been searching for you my entire life. Lord Ashworth sputtered. Your Majesty, surely you can't mean she's a servant, a nothing. She's my mate. The king's voice rang through the hall, silencing every whisper. She's my queen, and anyone who has ever mocked her, mistreated her, or called her unnatural will answer to me. He looked back at Sarah, and his golden eyes were soft. They called you wolf girl, like it was a curse, he said. They mocked you for loving wolves, but the wolves love you back, Sarah. They always have. He took her hand, raised it to his lips, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. And so do I. The next hour passed in a blur. Sarah remembered being led from the great hall, the wolves padding alongside her like a silver-grey honour guard. She remembered Lord Ashworth's face, pale with fury, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish as the Lycan king issued commands that stripped away every shred of his authority. She remembered Martha's expression when she'd realized that the girl she'd tormented for years was now untouchable. But mostly, she remembered his hand in hers, warm, steady, never letting go. His name was Fenris. She learned that from the servants who rushed to prepare the finest guest chambers, not for him, but for her. The Lycan king, Fenris Blackwood, 300 years old, ruler of the Northern Territories, the most powerful Lycan in the realm. And he was calling her his mate. It wasn't possible. None of this was possible. The chambers they brought her to were larger than the entire servants' wing where she'd lived her whole life. A fire already crackled in the hearth, casting warm light across velvet furniture and thick carpets. A copper tub steamed in the corner, filled with water that smelled of roses. And on the bed, a bed so vast she could have fit her entire old room inside it, lay a gown of deep green silk. For you, Fenris said from the doorway. If you want it. Sarah stood in the middle of the room, still wearing her stained servant's dress, still smelling of gravy and kitchen smoke, and felt like she might shatter into 1,000 pieces. I don't understand, she whispered. Any of this. I don't understand. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The wolves had dispersed once they'd reached the chambers, all except for the great silver one, who had curled up by the fire like he belonged there. What don't you understand? Everything. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold herself together. You called me your mate, your queen. But I'm nobody. I'm a scullery maid who talks to wolves. I'm the girl everyone thinks is cursed. You're not cursed. He moved closer, slowly, giving her space to retreat if she wanted. She didn't. Sarah, what do you know about Lycans? Just stories. That you can shift into wolves, that you live for centuries, that you're… She hesitated. Monsters. Powerful, she finished quietly. Something flickered in his golden eyes. We are powerful, but we're not monsters. At least, most of us try not to be. He stopped a few feet away from her. What do the stories say about mates? She shook her head. I don't know. Nothing. Every Lycan has a fated mate. One person, chosen by fate or the gods or whatever force governs the universe, who is meant to be ours. We spend our entire lives searching for them. Some find their mates quickly. Some search for centuries. Some… His voice roughened. Some never find them at all. And you think I'm yours? The words came out sharper than she intended. Because I can call wolves? Because I have some soul connection to them? Partly. He reached up, and his fingers brushed her chin, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. But mostly because the moment I walked into that hall, I felt you. Before I saw you, before I knew who you were, I felt something pulling me toward you, like a compass finding north, like finally coming home after 300 years of wandering. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. He probably could, with those Lycan senses. What if you're wrong? She asked. What if I'm just some strange human girl who happens to have a connection to wolves? What if you've made a mistake? I haven't. You can't know that. I can. His thumb traced gently along her jaw. I've waited 3 centuries for you, Sarah. I know. She pulled back, and he let her go immediately, his hand falling to his side. She crossed to the window, staring out at the dark forest beyond the castle walls. Somewhere out there, the wolves were waiting for her, the only friends she'd ever had. I don't know how to be a queen, she said to the glass. I don't know how to be anything but invisible. I've spent my whole life trying not to be seen, trying not to give anyone a reason to hurt me more than they already did. Who hurt you? The question was soft, but there was something underneath it, something dangerous. Everyone? She laughed, but there was no humour in it. The other servants, the nobles, Lord Ashworth's sons, when they thought it was amusing to throw things at the wolf girl and watch her cry. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I learned early that being different meant being a target, so I tried to hide. I tried to be small and quiet and forgettable. But they always found reasons to remind me that I didn't belong. Silence stretched behind her. Then she heard him move, felt him stop just behind her, close enough that his warmth seeped into her back. You don't have to be small anymore, he said quietly. You don't have to hide. You don't have to be invisible. I don't know how to be anything else. Then I'll show you. His hands settled on her shoulders, gentle but steady. I'll show you what it means to be seen and valued and protected. I'll show you what it means to be loved. She turned to face him, and the earnestness in his expression made her chest ache. Why? She asked. Even if I am your mate, why do you care so much? You just met me. You don't know anything about me. I know that you've been mistreated your whole life, and you're still kind. I know that you love creatures everyone else fears, and they love you back. I know that you have a strength inside you that 23 years of cruelty couldn't break. His hands slid from her shoulders to cup her face. And I know that I will spend the rest of my very long life learning everything else there is to know about you, if you'll let me. Her eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry. I don't trust easily, she warned him. I don't know if I can trust at all. That's all right. Trust is earned, not given. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, feather light. I'll earn it, however long it takes. He stepped back then, giving her space, and gestured toward the copper tub. The water's still hot. Clean clothes are on the bed. Food will be brought up shortly. Anything you want, just ask. He moved toward the door. I'll be in the chambers next to yours if you need me. For anything. At any hour. Fenris. He stopped, his hand on the door handle. The sound of his name on her lips felt strange, intimate. Thank you, she said. For what you did in the hall. For stopping Lord Ashworth. For She trailed off, not sure how to articulate the enormity of what had happened. "You never have to thank me for protecting you." His golden eyes held hers. "That's what mates do, Sarah. That's what family does. And whether you accept the bond or not, you have both now. You're not alone anymore." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Sarah stood in the middle of the beautiful room, surrounded by luxury she'd never imagined, and tried to make sense of the day. This morning she'd been a scullery maid scrubbing pots. Tonight, she was the Lycan king's mate. The great silver wolf lifted his head from his paws and looked at her. She crossed to the fire and sank down beside him, burying her fingers in his thick fur. "Is this real?" she whispered. "Is any of this real?" The wolf made a low sound in his throat, not a growl, but something softer, something that sounded almost like assurance. She didn't believe it yet. She couldn't. A lifetime of disappointment had taught her that hope was just another word for pain waiting to happen. But as she sat there in the warmth of the fire, her hand in the wolf's fur and the memory of Fenris's gentle touch still tingling on her skin, she felt something crack open in her chest. Something small and guarded and terrified. Something that wanted, desperately, to believe. 3 days passed, and the world didn't collapse. Sarah kept expecting it to, kept expecting to wake up back in the servants' quarters, scrubbing pots and dodging kicks from the cook. Kept expecting someone to burst through the door and announce it had all been a mistake, a cruel joke, and she needed to return to her proper place. But it didn't happen. Instead, there were meals brought on silver trays, more food than she could eat, prepared with care she'd never received. There were soft clothes in fabrics she'd never touched before. There were long hours spent in the castle gardens with the wolves who had taken up residence at the forest's edge, refusing to leave as long as she was there. And there was Fenris. He came to see her every day, always asking permission before entering, always giving her space. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply was there, telling her stories about the northern territories, asking about her favorite foods, sitting with her in comfortable silence when she didn't feel like talking. On the 4th night, the nightmare came. She was running through darkness, wolves howling all around her, but this time they were running from her, not toward her. She was calling for them, reaching for them, but they slipped through her fingers like smoke. And behind her, gaining with every step, were the voices of everyone who had ever hurt her. Wolf girl, freak, monster, unnatural thing. She woke with a scream trapped in her throat. The silver wolf was on his feet instantly, pressing his cold nose to her face. She clutched at his fur, gasping, trying to remember how to breathe. The room was dark, except for the dying embers in the hearth. She was safe. She was safe. A knock at the door. "Sarah," Fenris's voice, urgent with concern. "I heard. Are you all right?" She should send him away. She should tell him it was nothing. But the darkness was pressing in on her, and the echoes of those voices were still rattling around in her skull, and she didn't want to be alone. "Come in," she whispered. He entered quickly, still dressed in sleep clothes, his hair loose around his shoulders. His golden eyes found her in the darkness, and without a word, he crossed to the bed and knelt beside it. "Nightmare?" he asked softly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head. Then, surprising herself, she changed her mind. "They were running from me. The wolves. They were afraid of me." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "That's your deepest fear, isn't it? Not that people will hate you. You're used to that. But that the wolves, the only ones who ever accepted you, will leave too. The accuracy of it stole her breath. She hadn't even admitted that to herself. I've always felt more wolf than human, she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Even before I understood what was happening, I felt wrong in my own skin, like I was born in the wrong body, the wrong world. The only time I ever felt right was when I was with them. Her voice cracked. If they left me too, I don't know what I'd do. I don't know who I'd be. Sarah. He reached out and took her hand. The wolves will never leave you. Do you know why? Because of the bond, the soul thing you talked about. That's part of it, but there's something else. He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. I want to show you something. Will you trust me? She should say no. She'd known him 4 days. She'd spent 23 years learning not to trust anyone. But those golden eyes held nothing but patience and a hope so raw it made her chest ache. Yes, she said. He rose, releasing her hand, and stepped back from the bed. The silver wolf moved to stand beside Sarah, as if guarding her. And then Fenris began to change. It was nothing like the stories. There was no grotesque transformation, no cracking bones or torn flesh. One moment he was a man, and the next, between one breath and the next, he was a wolf. He was massive, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, larger even than the great silver one at her side. His fur was black as midnight, and his eyes were the same molten gold they'd been in human form. He stood in the moonlight streaming through the window, magnificent and terrifying, and somehow, impossibly, familiar. Sarah slid out of bed without thinking. The cold floor bit at her bare feet, but she barely noticed. She crossed the room in a daze, stopping just in front of the great black wolf. "Fenris?" she whispered. He lowered his head, and she raised her hand, and when her fingers touched the soft fur between his ears, something inside her clicked into place. This was what she'd been looking for her entire life. This feeling of recognition, of belonging, of finally coming home. "Oh," she breathed. "I understand now." The wolf made a sound, that same low rumble the silver wolf made, but deeper, more resonant. Then the air shimmered, and Fenris was human again, standing close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You feel it," he said. "The connection." "I've always felt it, with the wolves. But I thought it was just me being strange, being wrong." "You're not wrong." He cupped her face in his hands, and his touch was so gentle it made her want to weep. "You're rare. You're precious. There hasn't been a human with a wolf soul in 300 years. The last one became the greatest queen my kingdom ever knew." What happened to her? She lived a long, happy life with her mate. She ran with the pack under every full moon. And when she died, the wolves howled for 7 days straight. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "That's the legacy you carry, Sarah. Not a curse. A gift." "A gift," she repeated, trying to make the word fit in her mouth. For 23 years, she'd believed she was broken, wrong, unnatural. And now this man, this ancient, powerful king, was telling her she was precious. "Do you believe me?" he asked. "I'm trying to." "That's enough. For now, that's enough." He leaned down, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. Her heart stuttered, caught between fear and longing, but instead he pressed his lips to her forehead, lingering there for a long moment. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with something that looked almost like tears. "I've waited 3 centuries for you," he said softly. "I would have waited 3 more. I would have waited forever. Because you, Sarah, you're worth waiting for." She didn't have words. She had no idea how to respond to such naked devotion, such unwavering certainty. So she did the only thing she could think of. She stepped forward and pressed her face against his chest. His arms came around her immediately, holding her close, and for the first time in her life, Sarah understood what it felt like to be safe. Not alone, not invisible. Safe. The silver wolf settled at their feet. Through the window, she could hear the distant howling of the pack, singing to the moon. And in Fenris's arms, surrounded by the creatures who had always loved her, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. She was falling for him. She knew it with a certainty that terrified her. But for the first time, the terror wasn't enough to make her run. The confrontation came on the 7th day. Sarah had been walking in the gardens, the silver wolf at her side, enjoying the rare sensation of sunlight on her face without fear of punishment. For the first time in her life, she could simply exist, not working, not hiding, not bracing for cruelty. Then she heard the footsteps behind her. Well, well, the wolf girl, playing at being a lady. She turned. Lord Ashworth's eldest son, Marcus, stood on the garden path, flanked by 2 of his friends. She recognized them all. They'd tormented her for years, throwing stones, pulling her hair, once locking her in the root cellar for an entire night while they laughed at her screaming. The silver wolf growled, his hackles rising. "Call off your beast," Marcus said, though his voice wavered slightly. "Unless you want me to tell my father you set it on me." "Your father has no power here anymore." Sarah was surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The king stripped his authority. The king. Marcus's lip curled. "You think because that monster claimed you, you're suddenly someone? You're nothing, Sarah. You've always been nothing. A freak who talks to animals and doesn't know her place." He stepped closer, and the silver wolf's growl deepened. "You don't belong here," Marcus continued. "You don't belong in fine clothes and fancy rooms. You belong in the kitchens, scrubbing our floors. And once the Lycan king realizes what a mistake he's made, once he sees you for the worthless creature you really are, he'll throw you back where you came from. And I'll be waiting." The words hit her like stones. All the old shame, all the old fear came rushing back. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was all a dream, and she would wake up to find herself back in the servants' quarters, back to being nobody. "Nothing to say?" Marcus laughed. "That's what I thought. You can dress a pig in silk, but it's still—" "Finish that sentence." The voice came from behind them, low, deadly, and vibrating with barely controlled rage. Marcus spun around. Fenris stood at the garden's edge, and Sarah had never seen him look like this. His golden eyes had gone almost red, his hands were clenched at his sides, and the air around him seemed to shimmer with suppressed power. Behind him, emerging from the trees like shadows given form, came a dozen wolves. "Your Majesty," Marcus stammered, all his bravado evaporating. "We were just... I heard what you were just." Fenris moved forward, and his pack moved with him, surrounding Marcus and his friends in a ring of gleaming eyes and bared teeth. "I heard every word. You threatened my mate. You insulted my queen. And you did it in my territory, under my protection. I didn't mean... I was only..." You have 10 seconds to apologize to her. Fenris's voice was soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. On your knees. Marcus's face went purple with humiliation. For a moment, Sarah thought he might refuse, might cling to his pride even in the face of certain death. But then he looked at the wolves surrounding him, at the ancient predator standing before him, and his knees buckled. He dropped to the ground, head bowed. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Please." "Not to me." Fenris's golden eyes flicked to Sarah. "To her." Marcus turned, still on his knees, and looked up at Sarah. His face was twisted with resentment, with fear, with the particular hatred of someone forced to humble themselves before a person they considered beneath them. "I'm sorry," he spat. "I'm sorry, my lady." Sarah looked down at him, this boy who had made her childhood a misery, who had thrown stones at her and called her monster and laughed when she cried. She had dreamed of this moment 1,000 times, dreamed of seeing him brought low, of finally having power over someone who had hurt her. But standing here now, watching him grovel in the dirt, she felt nothing but exhaustion. "Get up," she said quietly, "and leave. Don't come near me again." Marcus scrambled to his feet and fled, his friends stumbling after him. The wolves let them go, parting just enough to allow their escape. Fenris crossed to her immediately, his hands coming up to cup her face, his eyes searching hers. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "No, I'm fine." But her voice was shaking, and she wasn't fine, not really. The old wounds had been ripped open, and she could feel them bleeding inside her. "You're trembling." "He's right." The words came out before she could stop them. "I don't belong here. I don't know how to be a queen. I'm just a scullery maid who talks to wolves. And one day you'll realize that, and you'll—" "Stop." His voice was firm but gentle. "Look at me, Sarah." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" he asked. "I see a woman who survived 23 years of cruelty and emerged with her heart intact. I see a woman who loves fiercely and forgives even when she has every right to hate. I see my equal, my partner, my queen." His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "I see the other half of my soul." "What if I can't do this?" she whispered. "What if I'm not strong enough?" "Then I'll be strong for you until you find your own strength. And when you're strong, you'll be strong for me. That's what mates do. That's what love is." Love. The word hung between them, shimmering with possibility. "You love me?" she asked, barely daring to breathe. "I've loved you since the moment I walked into that hall and felt you calling to my wolf." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I've loved you through every conversation, every moment of silence, every time you let me hold your hand or touch your face. I love you, Sarah. And I will love you for as long as I live, whether that's another 300 years or 3,000. She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her cheeks, but for the first time in her life, they weren't tears of pain. "I love you too," she said. "I don't know when it happened. I don't know how. But I love you, Fenris. I love you, and I'm terrified. And I don't want to leave. I don't want to go back to being invisible. I want to stay. I want to choose you." "Then choose me." His voice was rough with emotion. "Choose this. Choose us. I choose you." The words felt like a vow, like a promise, like the first true thing she'd ever said. "I choose you. I choose this. I choose to stay." He made a sound, something between a growl and a sob, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. It was fierce and desperate and unbearably tender all at once. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had gone spinning off its axis. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, the wolves around them began to howl. One voice, then two, then a dozen, rising in a chorus that echoed across the gardens and into the forest beyond. "They're singing for you," Fenris murmured against her lips. "For us. For the bond." Sarah laughed, a real laugh, bright and free and completely unguarded, the first genuine laugh she could remember in years. "Let them sing," she said. "Let everyone hear." And the wolves sang on, welcoming their queen home at last. The bonding ceremony took place under the full moon. It was tradition, Fenris had explained. Lycan bonds were sealed beneath the moon's light, witnessed by pack and kin. But this ceremony would be different. This ceremony would honor both halves of who Sarah was, the human woman and the wolf soul that had always lived inside her. The clearing in the forest had been transformed. Torches lined the edges, casting flickering light across the assembled crowd. Nobles from the northern territories stood beside castle servants, all of them watching as Sarah walked down the moonlit path toward the man who had changed her life. She wore white, not the elaborate gown of a human bride, but something simpler. A dress of flowing white silk that moved like water when she walked, her feet bare against the cool earth. Around her neck hung the amber pendant Fenris had given her, warm against her skin. And flanking her on either side, walking in perfect step with her, were the wolves. The great silver one who had found her when she was 5, a grey female with gentle eyes, a young black wolf barely out of puppyhood. They moved with her like an honor guard, like family, and when she reached the clearing's center, they fanned out to join the larger pack that waited in the trees. Fenris stood waiting for her, dressed in black, his golden eyes bright with emotion. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and she felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. Before the moon and the pack, the elder who officiated began. Before all who witness, these two souls come to be joined, not by force, not by arrangement, but by choice, and by the bond that fate itself has blessed. The words of the ceremony washed over her, ancient vows in the old tongue, promises of protection and partnership, of running together through whatever storms might come. Sarah spoke her parts from memory, her voice steady and clear, and watched Fenris's eyes grow brighter with every word. Then came the moment she'd been waiting for. "In the tradition of the wolf-souled," the elder said, "the bond is sealed not with words alone, but with the run. Let the pack bear witness as these two become one." Fenris's form shimmered, and suddenly the great black wolf stood before her. He lowered his head, and she placed her hand on his fur, feeling the bond between them pulse like a second heartbeat. Then she reached for that part of herself she'd hidden for so long, the wild thing, the wolf thing, the piece of her soul that had never felt human, and she let it rise. She couldn't shift. She was human, after all, despite everything. But as she ran into the forest with Fenris at her side, the pack flowing around them like a silver river, she felt something else. A connection deeper than flesh, stronger than bone. She ran on 2 legs while they ran on 4, and yet somehow, impossibly, they were the same. They were pack. They were family. They were one. When they returned to the clearing, breathless and laughing, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers. Fenris shifted back to human form and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, while the wolves howled their approval. "My wife," he murmured against her lips, "my queen, my heart." "My husband," she answered, "my king, my home." The feast that followed was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. She sat at the high table beside Fenris, and noble after noble approached to pay their respects. Some were warm, some were merely polite, but all of them bowed, acknowledging her as their queen. Then Lord Ashworth approached. He was diminished now, stripped of his authority, his lands reduced to a fraction of their former size, his sons banished to the far edges of the realm. He walked with the shuffling gait of a man who had lost everything he once valued. "Your Majesties," he said, his voice hollow, "I offer my congratulations." Sierra looked at him. This man who had allowed his sons to torment her, who had called her an abomination, who had demanded her execution. She could destroy him with a word. Fenris would do it gladly if she asked. But she thought of the girl she'd been, frightened and alone, dreaming of revenge that would never come. And she thought of the woman she'd become, loved, protected, powerful in her own right. "Thank you, Lord Ashworth," she said calmly. "I hope you find peace in your new circumstances." His face twisted with barely suppressed rage, but he could say nothing. He bowed stiffly and retreated, and Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to see him suffer. She had already won. Later, she spotted Martha among the servants carrying platters of food. The girl who had tripped her, who had called her wolf girl with such contempt, was now serving at her wedding feast. Their eyes met. Martha went pale, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped her tray. Sierra simply smiled and turned away. Some victories needed no words. That night, in chambers that were now truly hers, Fenris held her like she was the most precious thing in all the world. And when he loved her, gently, reverently, with a passion that left her breathless, she finally understood what it meant to be cherished. "I love you," she whispered in the darkness. "I still can't quite believe this is real." "It's real," he promised, pulling her closer. "And it's forever." 2 years later, Sarah stood on the balcony of their castle in the Northern Territories, watching the sun set over the mountains. So much had changed. She had learned to read, to write, to navigate the complex politics of court. She had established a sanctuary for children who were different, children with gifts that others feared, children who reminded her of herself. She had become the queen that Fenris had always believed she could be, and in her arms, wrapped in soft white blankets, was their daughter. She was only 3 months old, but already her eyes held flecks of gold among the brown. Already the wolves gathered beneath her window at night, singing soft lullabies that made her coo with delight. "She has your gift," Fenris said, coming to stand beside her. "The wolves love her already. They love her because she's ours." Sierra leaned into his warmth. "Because she belongs to the pack." "Like her mother?" "Like her mother." They stood together in the fading light, their daughter between them, and Sarah marveled at the path that had brought her here. 23 years of being mocked, feared, and dismissed. 23 years of believing she was wrong, broken, unworthy of love. And then one night, a king had walked into a hall and seen her for who she truly was. "Do you remember what they used to call me?" she asked softly. "Wolf girl, like it was a curse." "I remember." His arm tightened around her. I remember wanting to burn that castle to the ground for every cruelty they'd inflicted on you. I'm glad you didn't. She smiled, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Because now I wear the name with pride. Wolf Girl. The queen with a wolf soul. The woman the wolves chose before anyone else did. The woman I will love until the stars burn out, Fenris added. Their daughter made a soft sound, and from the forest below, a wolf howled in response. Then another. Then a dozen, until the air was filled with their song. Sarah closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. Once, she had been alone. Once, she had been invisible. Once, she had believed that the only creatures who could ever love her were the wolves. She had been wrong about so many things, but she had been right about that. The wolves had loved her first, and they had led her home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale of love, fate, and finding where you truly belong. Until next time.